come and introduce our speaker. What? Oh, yes, yes. Eric had a quick announcement. Okay. No, well, he wasn't on my note.
I asked her if I could make an announcement when I arrived. She said, sure. So 3 announcements. For those of you who are participating in the birding challenge, the deadline to turn in your paperwork is like October 18th, so it's coming up. So I just wanted to remind you that that's coming up. Also, the photo contest that we do every year, the deadline is Saturday. So if you have not submitted your pictures for the 15th annual Wild Bird Photography Contest at the store, you've got 2 days to get your pictures in. So that I wanted to remind you that. And then the last thing is we're going to be doing a fundraiser for Prescott Audubon at our store on Saturday, October 28th. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you. So that is the day that we're going to be celebrating our 20th anniversary of being in business. Crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to donate a portion of our sales that day to Prescott Audubon. So if you come and shop, then a portion of your sales will go to Audubon Society to support Prescott Audubon. So come buy some binoculars. No. All right. That cute new scope. There you go. And we're going to unveil a mural that night or that day. Yeah, you can't see it yet. You just drive by and it's not even there.
Thanks. Well, we're really excited to be part of the first presentation here at the Institute. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about Tori before we bring her on stage with the other star, Moonlight. Originally, Tori's a transplant from Maine. She loves the outdoors and calls herself an amateur naturalist. She's now a ranger at Red Rock State Park in Sedona, where she leads the majority of bird walks. Over the last 2 years, she alone has actually documented 163 species just within the park, which is pretty cool. She enjoys reading, photographing birds, and playing the ukulele. In addition to her career at Red Rock, she's also a volunteer at Runnin' with Wildlife, which is a wildlife sanctuary in the Verde Valley that rescues and rehabilitates wildlife, injured or orphaned. That's where she encountered and helped the injured Moonlight, which is he's a Western Screech Owl. He'll really be the star of the show when he comes on stage, I'll tell you that. But without further delay, I'd like to have Tori and then Moonlight take the stage. Tori?
I gotta remember to turn my, whoop! Don't point that at me. I've never been told I'm quiet. Did you turn it off? Turn it off, turn it off. Got it? Get it? Just don't point it over here. I don't know. I've never been told I'm quiet before, so now I have to try to tone it down a little bit because I am mic'd up. But yes, like she said, my name is Tori. Yeah, she's still. Put it outside. Toss it out the window. Better? All right. I think I'm just dinging off some of the metal in here. So yeah, I'm coming this evening from down in the Cottonwood area. I've really been blessed enough to be able to have done a lot of work with the Runnin' W over the last going on, gosh, almost 10 years now. So this is just a little bit about the rehab that we do in the area, and then a little bit about Moonlight, and then you guys can get to meet Moonlight. But I learned my lesson that if I bring him out now, you guys won't pay any attention to anything I say. So we'll take him out at the end. I promise not to talk too long. So Moonlight was actually originally brought into the rehab center going on 11 years ago. He was hit by a car in Chino Valley. So he has permanent nerve damage in his eyes. His eyes are kind of always blown like that. So he can't see well enough to be out on his own anymore. And when he was brought into the facility, it wasn't quite known at the time what his issue was. And eventually we figured it out. It didn't take that But he was named by a bronze sculpture artist named Tori down in the Sedona area. She was looking for a subject to sculpt, and I mean, how do you say no to that face, right? And she named him Moonlight, but Moonlight, I mean, he's never going to come when called, so you can call him whatever you like. So if, you get to the end of this presentation and you're like, oh man, Moonlight, I need one of my own, you can go buy like an exact bronze replica of Moonlight for about $8,000. And part of that proceeds actually go back to the Wildlife Rehab Center. We make it a little easier. But we're doing the box dance, right? But it is a really beautiful sculpture. They sell them down at the Rose Studio in Tlaquepaque, if you guys are ever down in that area. She did a really beautiful job. Oh, there we go. So the Run and W is the only licensed rehab facility in the northern Arizona area. So we get things from all over the place. We get things from up in the Navajo Reservation, Prescott, Flagstaff, Chino, the entirety of the Verde Valley. And we get a little bit of everything. Lots of javelinas, little baby owls, raccoons. This is actually a poor will that came in a couple years. Insect eaters are, yeah. This is the gray fox, actually, we still have, that was brought in just, his eyes weren't even open yet. So it was really great to see him grow up too. Just all sorts of things. Skunks. They're really cute when they're like that, right? It's a baby, it's a bobcat, little baby bobcat. Some reasons that we get critters in, a lot of times it is lead poisoning, especially with a lot of our vultures that we get in, coyotes, things like that, and poisoning. Usually don't have to tell you people that poison is a bad idea, right? I know that we really hate our wood rats, our pack rats, all that kind of jazz. But some of the worst things that we see come into the facility are creatures like owls and raptors that have accumulated poison, whether it's lead or rat poisoning. And it's a really sad, slow, painful way to go for these animals. And there's oftentimes not much we can do for them. So you might think like, hey, this is great, all the rats are gone, but a lot of times they end up outside dying, and that's especially around breeding season, is just an easy meal for an adult bird to bring back to the nest. And next thing you know, all the babies are dead, then the adults are dead, and the rats are going to come back anyway because you just killed off their natural predators. We do have some issues with the windmills in the area and other just human infrastructure. A lot of times actually we'll end up with critters, people not thinking about the time of year. They go, chop down a tree in their yard during prime breeding season. They decide to go do a remodel of their house the same time and find a bunch of, barn owl babies in there. Lots of things get brought in. Parents are hit by cars. They're hit by cars. We get things with all sorts of different injuries for all sorts of different reasons. Any idea what the biggest one, though, we see oftentimes? Somebody had it. Cats, right? My cat brought this bird in. My cat found this thing in the back. My cat found the baby bunnies. My cat found the baby skunk. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of times with the cats, because they just play with things and then they're like, oh, I'll go eat my fancy feast back at your kitchen. They puncture, right? And they're such tiny punctures that oftentimes they're easy to miss, that we can't find that injury until the infection set in or organs are failing. So it's always good to keep note, why something is coming in. We try to, get antibiotics on board real quick for that. Keep your cats inside, right? Anybody ever find an animal that needs to be rescued? Right, all the time, right in the backyard? Does anybody know the 5-step rescue plan? So on the other side of my gig, so I'm a park ranger down at Red Rock State Park. I also teach all the wilderness first aid and CPR classes. So this is actually direct from a lot of wilderness stuff too, right? Number one, who's number one? You are. I am, right? Don't go running into traffic or leaping into the raging river of death to rescue an animal. It's cute and cuddly, and as much as we want to save something, calling in the professionals, calling somebody that can help, giving me a call, somebody else in the area. You're number one. You can't help anything if you get killed in the process of helping that cute, cuddly animal, right? What happened to you, right? Like with the cat, as much as we can find out about what happened to this animal, why it's injured can help us kind of onboard things like antibiotics and certain medications to get an idea of how to help this animal, right? Was it hit by a car? Was it electrocuted, right? Did your dog find it? And sometimes we don't know the answer, right? It's just in our backyard, and we're the first ones to deal with it. But as much information as you can get, oftentimes it helps us a lot with trying to figure out what help we need to get these animals, because they can't tell us, right? They can't tell us they didn't look both ways before crossing the road. Number 3, this goes along with number 1, none on me. Animals are nasty, right? Just like people, right? We glove up for people. We want to glove up for animals. Keep something between you and that animal if at all possible. Oftentimes these guys have fleas. These guys have weird parasites. These guys have some sort of sickness, right? Rabies, all sorts of issues that you don't want to have that issue with. We had a woman once who had picked up a gray fox cub, and she decided to like run some errands first before finally bringing us a cub. The thing was crawling with fleas, and her car was full of fleas for long. I mean, no. I'm a big fan of like the towel over something, and get it in a box. Make sure it's got air holes and stuff like that. But make sure the box is nice and sealed. But again, take care of yourself first, right? We know, right, the grip strength on those great horned owls is pretty beefy, right? You don't want to just be like, hey, owl, right? Even Moonlight, with his teeny tiny little feet, can easily, be an issue. So protect yourself first, right? Are there any more? How many of you who've rescued critters wake up one morning and there's like a little baby Cooper's hawk? And you're like, oh, where'd you come from? I'll take you to the rehab center. And you come home and there's another one. And the next day there's 4 more, right? Look around a little bit. Sometimes, we all know, like, hey, if this thing is looking okay, can I get it back into a nest, right? Everybody's probably heard the old adage that, well, if you handled it, mom won't take it back because it smells like you. Most of the time, birds don't rely on their sense of smell. That's not the sense they're using, right? If you can get it back in the nest without causing an issue, hey, get it back up in the nest if there's no visible injuries. But this also goes with, hey, I found a little baby deer in my backyard, right? And we want to pick it up and help it, right? Because it's been abandoned by mom, no one's around, right? Deer leave their young, right, to go off and forage. The deer's there on purpose. Mom left it, right, and she'll come back for it. Is she going to come back for it, though, if you're like, I'm going to stand right here and keep you company until you mommy, right? Like, no, like, give the critter some space, right? Javelinas, deer, a lot of things like will kind of leave babies for a little bit and go off and forage, right? Or the baby gets, separated from its mother. Keep an eye on it, but kind of do it from a distance, right? Again, give us a call. We can tell you like if it's an issue or not. So many times with the Cooper's hawks things, all the time. The other thing too, you find a baby raccoon, right? Next day, find 4 more raccoons, right? Take a look around. Can we get it back to its home? Do we know where it came from? Oftentimes too, corvids, Cooper's hawks, things like that, they end up on the ground, they're fine there. As long as you don't have a dog or a cat in your backyard, mom and dad will find them and feed them on the ground, right? It's just part of their fledging process. You'll also know that if, it takes you an hour to catch the thing, it's fine. It's fine. Like, just leave it. Like, I don't need it. If it took 8 of you to corral this thing and you finally shoved it in the car, like, yeah, here you go. No, take it back, right? As long as it's not going to be injured, right? Like if you have, maybe busy traffic or, like I said, a dog or a cat or something like that. It's really fun, actually, to watch, when the Cooper's hawks are hopping all over the place, squawking for mom and dad, And even the fledglings, like, as long as they can get a few feet up into the trees, they'll be okay, they'll be safe. Shouldn't have to point this one out, but every great once in a while, people bring us roadkill, We can only help so much. You know, I'm not saying like stop and check for a pulse on every, you know, dead animal you find on the side of the road. But unfortunately, we can't help everything, right? Even some things that are brought in that, you know, maybe said, hey, this thing looked okay at first, things can decline. You know, we don't know sometimes what injuries we're dealing with. And sometimes, again, the stress of rescue can be very difficult for animals as well, right? And sometimes even that can cause a decline while we have them. The big thing you don't want to do, again, is try to keep anything, right? We also get a lot of things that are brought into the facility maybe weeks or months after somebody found this animal, thinking they were going to help it, thinking like, oh, I found a little baby raven. I always wanted a raven. Whoa, what a great pet. This is going to be awesome, right? A lot of these, oh my gosh, there's people up there. Sorry, I'm not even looking at you guys. A lot of these creatures have really specialized diets. They require certain things in their meals to develop healthy organs. You know, specifically, a lot of times with our foxes and our cats, they need like brain matter, right? Is that something you can just like pick up at the store? Like, hey, got my baby bobcat the brains it needs, right? And it's against the law, right? Can't be keeping these things in your home. You know, our goal is to rehab things and get things back in the wild, right? We don't want to keep things unless we absolutely have to. And you'll find that, hey, the cute, cuddly little baby animal grows up into like, you know, a big 300-pound something, right? Or something that's just destroying your house, right? And then all of a sudden we end up with you on our porch being like, hey, here you go, right? Can we put that creature back in the wild? Probably not, right? Because it's already either imprinted on humans or, you know, the diet you were feeding it affected it, and we've waited too long to fix an injury, right? So whatever you do, if you do find something, try to get it to a licensed rehabber as soon as possible, right? And again, give us a call. I brought a bunch of flyers. Whew. Do not give me grief for the design of these flyers. Billy, who runs the facility, great guy, not a computer guy. But the phone number is on there in the email. Definitely feel free to give us a call. Billy's there 24/7. Literally, this is his life. And if he can't help, he'll probably give you my number and we'll coordinate something, right? One of my favorite pictures. I did have one time, this isn't mine, but I did one time have a great horned owl I had picked up on the side of 89 and put him in a box. And I knew the box was kind of like, ooh, guy, just stay in this box until I can get you somewhere. One of my biggest fears is always like something busting out of the box in the back of my car. And I'm going to have to like explain that to a police officer that pulls me over for driving pretty crazy. Sorry, officer, there's this owl in the back of my car. So again, we can get things in with all sorts of injuries. We are super blessed to have a whole bunch of vets that actually donate their time and efforts to us in order to, you know, basically put the pieces back together again. This is a black hawk that was found up at Slide Rock that needed its wing pinned. Any guesses on how many Cooper's hawks we get a year? I think at one point we had 37 at a time. And they pop around like little popcorns, right? Just leave them, like they're perfectly fine. Don't bring me any more Cooper's hawks. But they are ridiculously cute. All sorts of injuries, you know. Unfortunately, this is a turkey vulture with lead poisoning. You can really see how when the organs start failing and the blood, you know, really stops getting around, how pale their feet are too, and you can even see how pale he is on the head. You can swap out, you know, any lead shells. A lot of times Game and Fish will do that. Swaps a couple times a year if anybody hunts. And of course, again, we always aim to release. It's one of our favorite things to do is be able to, you know, bring everybody together and see something get released. We try to get as close to where they were picked up from as we can. Obviously with 37 Cooper's hawks, I can't just like, we try to spread them around. We tend to release in spring and fall just because summer is so stressful and the time of year. And with a lot of birds, we have to do a lot of research with when we release, depending on birds that are already there, especially I would say more so when it comes to owls and things that tend to stick around a little bit. One of my favorite things is oftentimes, like when we do post a release, the photographers come and we're like, yay, photographers. Because I can also tell you that when we open up the box, the bird's gone in about 0.3 seconds. So like having somebody with a fast clicker is nice to have around. We appreciate that. But then sometimes things can't go back out, right? So we've got Moonlight. Again, he was hit by a car, has permanent nerve damage in his eyes. You know, when that's realized that they can't be re-released, they get a job, right? They get some work to do to earn their mice. So we train our birds to the extent that a wild animal can be trained as educational ambassadors, right? You guys are going to get a chance to see him nice and up close, ask some questions, take some pictures. It's not an opportunity a lot of us get all the time. Even birding, right? The owl's usually like, way out there, right? And you're like, oh, there he is, you know. Or you're like, I don't see him, right? Or it's at night, right? We hear them, but we don't see them. So it's our opportunity to basically use those guys to educate you about the importance of them in our ecosystem, right? And the importance of rescue and rehab. So part of that training essentially is getting them used to sitting on a glove. It's hundreds of hours for me to have this permit. It's hundreds of hours for him to kind of learn what he's supposed to do. Doesn't mean he wants to do it all the time. Absolutely not. Even tonight, he just finished molting. We don't do programs over the summer. We'll see how well he behaves this evening. But they are still wild animals, right? It's not like they were born to do this. You know, it's not like someone with a falcon or a Harry Potter Hedwig thing, right? You know, my husband calls him the hate machine. Because he just like, why doesn't he love us? Why doesn't he, you know? It's like, babe, this is a wild animal, right? So it's a lot of hours. And actually, when we first started working with Moonlight, one of the things he would do is this. He would just lay down. And he would just be like, no, I'm done. And I remember one of the first programs I did with him, I brought him out, and I just was like, he just laid on my hand. I was like, here's the owl. Like, oh. I was like, this is not going to work for us, right? But we do try to respect them. I mean, some days he doesn't really want to participate, and you know, I can't force it. You know, so fingers crossed, right? He's going to perform for you guys. It's going to be great. Yeah. So much better. So Moonlight, because he has nerve issues in his eyes, most of the rehab birds that we have and wildlife ambassadors have enclosures that are outdoors, right? Because we want them to have as much space as they can. But with Moonlight and his eye issues, we were worried that if he was outside, something could still kind of reach in there and grab him, and he wouldn't know something was after him. So I actually ended up taking Moonlight home. That's part of my holding permit that I have through the feds, even though I'm never giving him back. He is a foster with me, technically, through the government. So I took him home with me. He's been at home with me for about 6 years. People send us Christmas presents, and you know, he's you know, like I said, he's not a pet. He's a foster. He's got his own room. He's got a really big cage. We've got a freezer full of mice. I do let him out. Got to turn off all the ceiling fans and put the dog away, but I try to let him out a couple days a week so that he can spread his wings. He's still fully flighted. We don't clip wings. But he flies like a blindfolded person runs. Like, can you imagine that in your head? Like, I'm going to hit something at some point, right? Kind of, you know, kind of slow. And we usually try to redirect him before he hits something. But Harry Potter, right? First year we had him home. Gryffindor, right? We had a good time. I had a good time. And it's a really great way to see, I mean, we know, some of us probably know Western Screech Owls, one of their really neat things that they do is kind of change their shape, like a lot of other owls do too. So you can kind of see his display tufts come up, especially like when he's sleeping. He like gets all that tall and skinny, and display tufts come all the way up. And as I wake him up, he gets like just smaller and fatter. Like, I love it. He's like a little transformer. And in many cases, I mean, we know, especially with our desert animals, They get most of the liquid that they need from the blood of their victims, right? They're like little vampires. But Moonlight, my husband, was doing some reading and said, well, they don't mention that he needs like a water bowl in there. And I was like, well, I'm trying to explain to him. I said, he doesn't really need it. He's like, I'm gonna put him a water. He needs a water bowl, right? He's a living animal. He needs a water bowl. He loves it. Loves it. He is in that thing every single day. He makes a huge mess. He gets all wet and he loves it. And I was like, perfect. I went back to the rehab center. Everything has a huge water bowl, so they can all get in it, right? The great horned owls have like these big, like little kiddie pools, and they're all in it. And they love it, right? So you want to attract owls? Put a pool in your backyard. Right? Nice shallow one though. Moonlight weighs about a quarter pound, right? So not a wicked big guy. He eats 2 half mouses. He likes heads. He likes brains. A day. So I usually end up picking out mouse butts and bottoms at least a couple times a week. Believe me, if you miss one, you're gonna smell it pretty quick. One of his favorite things to do, so even though he's mostly blind, he's not completely blind, is I put his mice in the same place every day. Don't tell him that. Like he hunts, he hops around for them, he hunts, he drags them all over the place, he squirrels them away, goes back to them later. I really love watching him do that. They're very expensive. Mouse money. Moonlight can easily eat over $100 worth of mice a month. And like I said, those Cooper's hawks we're talking about, right? 37 Cooper's hawks, they're all eating 3 times as much as he is. So during those seasons, it's one of the reasons we, again, do education programs, is to basically raise money for this kind of stuff. We do grants and things like that and donations, but we receive no federal funding and no state funding for operating this facility. More nice. All right. I know what you're really here for, so give me a minute. Let me pull him out. So again, Moonlight he still considers himself a wild animal, right? I'm going to pull him out and hook him up, but he might do something that's called baiting, when essentially he might basically try to run away, be free. I'm going to have him hooked up, but just in case you're wondering, well, why isn't he staying still? It's because he thinks he can run away. Yes.
Do you have to thaw out the mice?
Yes.
Okay.
My husband does not let me thaw them out on the counter. That was a conversation that was had fairly early on. They have their own freezer in the garage, but he gets a beer fridge out of it. So I mean, but usually they don't take long to thaw. So I have like a bowl actually that a friend made for me that has like dead mice all over it. It's cute. But I thaw them out in there. And especially during molting season, which he's just finishing, I mean, he eats nothing but heads, and it's great, so great. All right, okay. All right, little man. Gotta hook you up. Because again, even though he is fully flighted, you guys probably don't want him up there flying around in the rafters and have to go fetch a ladder. So usually when I take him out at home, I won't use a glove, but he doesn't like how sweaty my hands get. He starts biting me. So he has little anklets. We just kind of hook a leash through, so I have something to hang on to. I gotta get my glove on, man. Give me a second. Come here. Oh, you're gonna cause a problem. Come here. We won't go too into details. Nope. So that's what we call baiting. the nice thing with Moonlight is I can just pick him up and put him down. Red-tailed hawks, great horned owls. Takes a little bit more like, but they all kind of do it as, I mean, he's been cooped up in there since about 3:30, so he's ready to get out. But this is Moonlight. So Moonlight, again, is a Western Screech Owl. He's fully grown. He's never going to get any bigger. We know he's a boy because he is quite small, and he's never laid an egg, right? They will do that, just like chickens, you know, if they're fat and happy. If we get females into the rehab center, they'll lay eggs. But when we get the females in, they're good solid 25-30% bigger. He, like I said, has been with me for going on 10 years. We can't age them, right? They don't have teeth like a dog or a cat. He doesn't have rings like a tree. He's not going to get any more gray. Essentially, you know, they can live 7 to 10 years in the wild, right? If they're wicked lucky, we can triple that in captivity, right? Because he's never going to have to, you know, go looking for his mice. I mean, he likes to pretend he's looking for his mice, but they're in the same spot every day. He doesn't have to deal with cats or predators or a lot of sicknesses, you know, environmental issues, right? I'm never going to, like, cut down his tree he's in or anything like that, other than having to drive over here. Right, he's in it whether he likes it or not. And so he does hoot. He's got a nice, cute little trill. When I first brought him home, he never made a peep for probably a solid year and a half. And I was doing another presentation and had put in a whole bunch of owl calls, different species. And at one point, I'm hearing hooting. And I'm like, oh, did I like forget to turn the computer off? No, he's in the back hooting. And he's never stopped since. He's a big fan. He likes to hoot, I would say probably like 8 or 9 o'clock into like 5 or 6 in the morning or so. You know, but like I said, he has his own room. And I have earplugs. He gets extra hooty like around that breeding season, like December, January. It's like an extra hoo-hoo, right? And I'm always like, oh, sorry, man, it's just still not going to happen, right? I do always tell Billy, though, like if he ends up with another one that, you know, has eye issues or has something like that, I would totally just not tell my husband, like, see how long it takes him to notice there's an extra bird. One of my favorite things, though, about Moonlight is that you can really see the fringes on his, you know, so he's got feathers everywhere. He's got feathers on his, you know, eyelashes and on his eyelids. He's got feathers all the way down to his feet. You can really see the fringes, right, on those primaries. Right, with owls, you know, roughly even 60-70% of their weight is just feathers, right? It's pretty crazy. If we stay in the light long enough, you'll start to see his right eye will actually start to eventually react to the light, but like not fast enough, right? But you can see kind of that deer in headlights looks that he gets, that it just makes him ridiculously cute. Yeah.
Does he know you?
I think he is familiar with me. I mean, he's never said my name or anything like that. But it's funny because we have done a lot of times, artists will call and say, hey, we'd love to like paint one of your birds or draw one of your birds. And we'll pose. On a good day, he'll sit for 4 hours. I mean, as long as I keep my arms straight and don't futz with him too much, he'll sit. Right? That's what they do. They sit. But sometimes, like, depending, like, because he can tell you guys are all here, I have to be quiet, which is difficult for me, because he'll just always look to me, right? We call him kind of a typewriter head, because he goes fast, and he goes back, right? Questions? Comments? If he poops on the floor, I'll pick it up, I promise. Question? Yes?
In his cage, do you have a nesting cavity, like a natural box where you go in cavity?
I do. He rarely goes into it. I think probably maybe with his eyes, it's kind of already dark enough as it is. He's got a couple perches he really likes. But I thought for sure he'd be in that more often, and he's not usually. He's in the pool. He's in the pool all the time. And I would have thought, yeah, a cavity-dwelling animal would prefer that, but he doesn't really too much.
And the turn 180?
270.
Oh, wow.
Is there any thought of breeding?
No, because again, you can't keep them, right? You'd have to have a permit. Our goal is not to make more of these guys have to live, indoors with us. So no, that's definitely part of our permit. We don't do any sort of breeding or anything like that. It would be ridiculously cute, right? But no. Kristen?
People send him Christmas presents?
Every once in a while, I get some Christmas presents. One of the last ones I got was a little Mexican sombrero. I haven't quite got, because he's been wicked molty, so he does molt twice a year. And yeah, he's like, he's usually pretty good. He just usually doesn't like people behind him. But yeah, keep watching the Instagrams for Mexican hat Moonlight. But the unicorn was a present. Sometimes we get, bags of mice, toys. He likes some toilet paper rolls. I don't know. He likes them. Is there another question?
Are fleas ever an issue for birds?
Not that I've ever had. I mean, I'm from back east. They were an issue everywhere. Out here, I don't think I've ever seen a flea in my dog. You guys might be a little different because you guys are a little more wet than us in Cottonwood, but not yet.
So why is he liking the lights?
I think he's hearing people up here. I think they have excellent hearing, right? We know owls have excellent hearing. Oftentimes their ears are actually offset, right? One's higher than the other, which also allows them to hear depth, right? So think of like those great grays in the snow, or barn owls in hay, like, they can hear where something is down below. So he can hear very well. No, you can't pet him. That's usually a question I get. I guess I don't have enough kids here. Yes?
When Moonlight is in the pool, is he just standing in this pool or is he splashing?
Oh, he splashes. He splashes. He dunks his head under. He likes to drink. He loves to, especially after he eats, he loves to go, wash his beak off and stuff. Yeah. I do have to trim his beak maybe once a year or so. And I can do his toenails. Those are the easy bits, but I'm not touching the beak. He, unlike, I don't know if, I know some of you have parrots, his bite isn't bad, it's the feet, right? He gets those wicked needly talons, right? Owls kill with their feet, right? Usually that impact with the talons, claws through the spinal column. He will always come after your feet first. So I try to keep his nails trimmed. He just has his own pair of nail clippers I use. He's not a huge fan.
Do you know the book Wesley the Owl and the Girl That He Loved?
No.
Oh, it's great.
Moonlight doesn't love me now.
It's a great story. You might like it about
I
a
will
barn
100%.
owl and a biologist, and she
Yeah.
couldn't be rehabbed, and
Yeah.
had the
Barn owls are very social. Barn owls, we definitely have worked with them in the past. They're much more apt to hey, you got a mouse? Okay, I'll be your best friend, right?
But she discussed the challenges of the talons. And
Yeah, especially with a bigger critter. Like I said, usually I when I'm home, I carry him around. He's got a perch, so I'll put if I'm doing stuff, just stick him on. He doesn't care, right? When we first brought him home, he gets very active at night. My husband is an architect, and because he's really not sighted enough to fly too much, he is on the ground a lot in his cage, and he's got a couple perches he really likes. He knows where they're at. But my husband put in ramps, and he loves to run up the ramps and run all over the ramps. And he was asking me about ADA angles for blind owls and ramps and things. So I'm sure whatever you put in will be fine. But when we first brought him home, we had a very small apartment, so he was in our bedroom. And we'd find ourselves, though, staying up all night watching him. And we were like, oh my God, we gotta go to bed. Like, this is really, it's like reality TV. This is awesome. Like, we gotta go to bed. Like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So I got like a camera, like one of those like webcams, so I could watch him during the day. He doesn't do anything. Saving it up, right? So I'd go to check, oh, nope, hasn't moved. Huh, nope, still hasn't moved. But it's actually one of my next projects that I'd love to put in like a live webcam. So if you guys are up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, we'll go check in on Moonlight. It's on my agenda. Yes.
How fast can a healthy one dive?
Dive? To be honest, I don't know. I will have
Do they dive
have
fast?
to look
Do they
that up.
dive?
I would imagine that because, again, they tend to be a sit and wait, right? They're going to find a tree, they're going to sit and wait for something to crawl or swim or glide by or whatever. So they're not diving after something like ridiculously fast, but I bet pretty quick. I mean, his wings outstretched are much bigger than his body. Right? Because again, owls, their goal is to fly silent. That's why he's covered in feathers, literally head to toe. Right? They're fringed. Anybody ever hear like a raven fly overhead? You can hear those suckers a mile away. Right? That is not sneaking up on a mouse in the middle of the night. Right? When he flies, you really can't hear anything. Right? And those big wings means he doesn't have to flap his wings as much. So I think he's using his stealth more probably than like the speed of like a peregrine or a kestrel that's going to try to grab something on the wing.
How big is his wingspan?
He won't let me pull his wings out right now. I'm looking at him like, they're probably pretty decent. Probably almost 2 feet.
No, that's,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then in the wild, obviously they would eat mice. What else?
So in the wild, they'll eat mice, rodents. They'll go after little insects, snakes, lizards. Crayfish or another thing I've heard. I tried to give him a crayfish once and he didn't want it. He does like mealworms. I'll eat some mealworms every once in a while. He prefers the little fuzzy rat. He likes the fuzzy ones, not as much as the naked ones. So great.
Do you always order mice and rats for them, or do you ever, like, if you found a mouse would
So we order them from a lab in Texas. She asked if we, if you were like, oh man, I got tons of mice, like here's some mice. Again, it's like we don't know what they're getting into. Yeah. So we really we order lab just to keep them, as clean as we can, because who knows what they're getting into. Prescott, oh, no.
Does he spit out little pellets?
Yep, he spits out pellets. I actually have one of his up here, in with a great horned owl pellet, so you can see how tiny they are. So it's not like the real fun pellets you get to dig through for all the bone bits, because he shreds things pretty well. But his pellets are probably like the size of like a slightly elongated jelly bean.
So you do notice that he has changes in emotions?
I would say he definitely changes when he's molting, like stand back, like don't touch me, I don't want to be messed with, I'll eat only heads. This is post-molt, so he's looking pretty good. I'm actually very impressed with him. Like, you're gonna get extra mouse heads today. And again, like during breeding season is like when that gets wicked hooty. Like he cranks up that hoot a little bit. Again, another good indicator of a male, because those males have those larger vocal cords.
But over the course of the day, do you notice like he has mood changes at all?
No, because he sleeps. For the most part, he sleeps. Unless I'm in there screwing in the office, and I'm like, oh, sorry, man, I just needed something, That's why, like, when my husband, when we first brought him home, he was in his office when we moved, and he couldn't do it. He moved out. He was like, I can't. He's looking at me. He's judging me. And I was like, he can't see you. But it means I got the bigger office, so I guess I was okay with that. See, when he starts looking behind me is when I think he's going to take off on me. Yeah, you're not very sneaky, just going to say it. Right, he's like, okay, never mind.
So you were talking about not having a female, for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
If there was another male that came
They say they get along very well in captivity, that in captivity they will tolerate that. And I think it's probably because there wouldn't be a female around, it wouldn't be a territorial thing. Probably need a bigger cage.
Maybe a new
But he's already got his own room. I mean, I got room in there, so. Yeah. Any other questions? I will say, like, oh, run it back. There we go.
What is the range?
The range for the eastern or western screech, I think it's like Rocky Mountains west, essentially. I think they got a pretty good range. They're actually one of the most common owls that we get in this area. We get a lot of screech owls in. But again, you'd never know it, right? They're tiny. Their hoot sounds like almost more like an insect, like a trill of like a toad or a peeper. So if you're out and you didn't know what you were listening to, you probably wouldn't even know it was an owl. But they have a pretty large range. I don't think they swap over to eastern until I think the divide is at the Rocky Mountains. Oh, my phone can.
Do you want my phone?
It's like, he's like, that's it. Sorry. Sometimes he'll go, do, 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 do. It's almost like a whinny. Like, I really don't know where this screech came from, because I have made him not happy before. And I've gotten like the, ooh, you know, but there's not a screech. You ever heard of barn owl?
Yeah, that's
Ooh, that's a screech, right? Doesn't have a syrinx, like, makes some crazy noises. Any sort of like zombie movie you've ever watched, I bet they're using all like barn owl calls for that. I've got a couple great videos of like going to, you know, take out barn owls to put them in a box because we're going to release them. And that thing is just not happy. He does do the beak clack, right? That's another good thing to listen for. Like if you're ever out looking for owls, you know, look down for the pellets. Listen for the beak clack, you know, depending on the time of year, especially with like barn owls and great horns, that clack, you can hear it for pretty good, good ways. His not as much.
Question.
Yes.
In nature, do they make a nest or do they find out holes?
Yeah, they're cavity nesters. Yeah, so that's why he was probably asking, like, would they like, you know, like a cavity to be safe in. So these guys are going to be in saguaros, they're going to be in old woodpecker holes, things like that for sure. Yeah. Owl boxes. We've had some success with owl boxes in and around the area. Actually, it's catching on with the wineries. They're like, oh, you want to release an owl? Release the owl over here, right, by our vines. And they're putting up owl boxes. The big thing with the screech owls is, though, is you got to make sure you're getting the Western Screech Owl box because they won't habitate in the Eastern because the Easterns are bigger. Yeah. And, you know, again, it's got to be the size where the female can kind of sit in there and puff up and take up all the space. I know, I love it. Yes. He does a little bit. Sometimes he'll throw me off. He'll hoot like in the middle of the day, but not too much. Usually it's my fault. Like if something I did, I woke him up. He's wicked cute when he sleeps, though. Yeah, you are.
Does he sleep with his head turned round and tucked in, or does he sleep?
He kind of sleeps like just tucked down, hunkered down, just straight ahead.
But with his ears up?
Sometimes with his ears up, yeah. He's the mighty transformer. What do they call that? I don't know what their slogan is. Transformers. Yes, question. Huh?
Would you take a question on your facility?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you handle a full-size buck deer?
Nope. That's one of the few things we won't take for the most part are full-size adult mammals, especially larger creatures. A lot of that stress reaction with larger animals, full-grown javelina, full-grown deer, full-grown bobcat. Remember who's number one, right? Do you want to wrestle a full-grown buck into the back of your car? Right? Usually ends up being more of like a stress reaction to the two, you and the animal, that we don't usually screw with full-grown adults. Yeah, birds, things like that, 100%. We don't usually take reptiles, but we know people that will. So again, like if it's not something we can take, we'll find out who can take it. Feel free to come up and take some pictures too. I'll hang out for a little bit too. So.
Is he pretty comfortable in his carrier, or does he ever get stressed out?
He's pretty good in it. Again, I try to keep him in there as little as possible. And I think at this point he kind of knows, like if he's in the carrier, like we're going to do a show. So he settles down pretty quick in it, especially with the soft sides. Yeah, the hard side ones. One of the first times I'd gotten my permit, we were kind of doing a trial run. It wasn't Moonlight, but it was another Screech Owl. And it was kind of like in a cat carrier, like a harder cat carrier. And I got to the site. We were literally just going to like show up, take him out for like a minute, put him back and go back to the facility. Like it was training for all of us. Pulled him out and there was blood everywhere. And I was like, oh, what happened? He'd caught like a talon, like in something. And it's, you know, think of like a head wound or something, like they just bleed prolifically, even though it's like not a huge deal. But I was mortified. And I pulled him out and he was like, whatever, it's fine. But I was like, So no more hard containers. Yeah, no.
Is there a perch in there?
No, only because he has a hard time hanging on when we're moving. So I don't usually tend to put a perch in. Oh.
Is it strange that he keeps hooting when he never gets a reply?
I mean, I'll reply to him, but sometimes I'll play him back to him. Give him, you know, I don't want to give him too much hope, but, and I don't, one time, I mean, I don't like to leave like the window in his room open at night because Lord knows what I'm going to have in there when I come in back in the morning. But one time we were in uptown Sedona, that's where I used to live. There was a Screech Owl that hooted back. And that was kind of cool. It was kind of neat to see that reaction, yeah.